Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Obviously, the counteroffensive is the name of the game, so we're going to look in depth in what's happening and what's the goals for it, and I'm going to share it with you as much as I can. I already made a post about it yesterday on the community tab, so if you don't follow it, I would recommend you do that. Importantly here, still major OPSEC rules, so I'm not going to be violating and so on. We need to very clearly separate two things. One thing is Ukrainian controlled territory that is confirmed. That is a kind of public information that has been discussed. Ukrainians have already posted visual confirmation for that. That territory is not where Ukraine is like essentially their front end. That is the territory where it's already kind of safe for Ukrainians. So their battle lines are obviously closer to the Russian positions. What I wrote in yesterday's post, and I'm just going to repeat it here, was that the plan of the armed forces of Ukraine at this stage was to engage some of relatively small number of forces that they have prepared for the counteroffensive, to make sure that they penetrate the first line of defense and get to the more concrete second line of defense of the Russians on the favorable positions. So capture some of the local tactical heights, get closer towards the line of fortifications of Russians, demine certain paths, outline where the main Russian supply channels are, outline where the main Russian traps are, outline where the main Russian artillery placement is. That was the plan for the first part of the offensive. It is still ongoing. And the one thing that we need to understand is that it's a very costly offensive. I specifically, just to kind of verify, I've looked out all of the major kind of battles that was discussing this for like a face-to-face breaching of pre-prepared fortified positions. And the first stage of operation is always bloody, like extremely bloody. And it can range from couple of days in some certain battles to couple of weeks and even couple of months in some of the other operations. It always depends what kind of forces are available to the attacker and what kind of fortification, what kind of forces are available to defenders, plus the geography. So every storming is individual, but we can expect that the first operation phase is gonna take certain time. The goal is to breach the Russian, not breach, but to reach the Russian second line of defenses. Let me outline them for you right now. There you go. This is roughly where you would see the second line of the Russians. So Ukraine is, roughly speaking, we can say, is attacking at four directions. We know that there is an attack here in like Orikhiv. It's roughly speaking one direction. Then there is like attack on this side of the front line. Then there is Novosilka direction. So all in all, there is also action in Vuhledar, but that one I still cannot fully confirm. There is very little, but I'm hearing rumors, but nothing concrete. And we see already some successes. We see that there is already areas that Ukraine has actually acknowledged that has been liberated permanently. Like, for example, we have today the settlement of Blagodatne completely liberated with the flag and putting like the videos and so on. But we also are hearing that Staromayorske, Makarivka, Rivnopil, Novodarivka, all of these settlements are also being processed by Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are going to get these settlements liberated. So the advances are really good on this direction of Velika Novosilka. Beyond that, the advances are also very good around the direction of Orikhiv. This is where Ukrainians are actually advanced towards Robotyne. This is where that battle where Russians engaged a lot of their defenses and destroyed some of the columns of Ukrainians, and the video was spread by the propagandist channels are actually happening, but they're also taking some part of this area here, like Myrne and so on. So there are battles that are happening, and Ukraine is taking some of the important heights, taking some of the important tactical positions. And important for us to understand is what did Russia prepare? What did Russia have to to slow down, to stop Ukrainian offensive? Well, first thing to understand is like we know that Ukraine did an attack on Arihiv and was quite a big attack. We know that there was like a lot of Western equipment, and the first discovery that Ukraine did was that while we were expecting that the first line of contact would be mostly populated by the mobilized soldiers, it was in fact more of a mixed groups of mobilized soldiers and some of the Russian elite forces. So a lot of the synergy that Russia has found, it found that if mobilized forces are in the mix supported with some kind of a line infantry to say, then they are fighting a little bit better. And it's actually quite funny, like as a sidestep, it's kind of funny that Russian war correspondents reported as a great victory that the Russian army just didn't run at the first assault of Ukrainians, and now it's being sold like a great victory. It's just kind of hilarious. But that was the first thing that was found, is that the Russian forces on the front line, on around that second line of defense, actually has some, well, elite units, like, the units that actually know how to fight. Secondly, I already talked to you that Russian doctrine was to have the kind of specific strategic reserves that are there to, whenever Ukraine engages in some kind of main attack direction, the one main attack direction, that strategic force should go essentially and intercept that main attack direction and therefore bind it, and therefore stopping the great breakthrough and stopping the offensive of Ukrainians. Well, what we saw is that Russians were not only not willing to wait, they were very trigger happy to actually engage. And what I'm hearing, about 25% of those reserves were actually engaged to support the Arihiv direction, to stop the breakthrough of Ukrainians on the Arihiv direction. Moreover, what we are hearing is that the forces from Kherson region, because of the flooding of the dam, they are now being freed. So these forces are also being sent to reinforce this Arihiv direction. And this is, I believe, Russians thought that Ukraine is going to do something that they did on the 24th of February, that they will just engage majority of their forces and actually maybe even consider if this is like a main breakthrough on the Arihiv direction right here. So the problem with that is, obviously, as soon as these reserves are engaged, that's it. They're essentially very low mobility. They cannot be like quickly reassigned. So if Ukraine chooses some other direction of attack, for example, Vika Novosilka, then no Kherson forces and no 25% of these strategic reserves. It's only these guys. So the number of forces they're going to be meeting, for example, the main line of attack from Ukrainians from Vika Novosilka would be lesser. That is a victory for Ukrainian side. But that was interesting. Second thing, I believe Ukrainians were expecting to have a dominance in the air, in their local air power. Like we've seen a lot of proficient use of drones by the Ukrainian forces. However, on the same Arihiv direction, we saw that Russians have prepared actually like groups of drone operators that are flying loitering munitions, and they were actively destroying incoming Ukrainian columns, like by flying in multiple drones at once. And I believe Ukraine thought that they would need to keep the air clear. Therefore, they didn't use electronic warfare countermeasures, because they were expecting that their drones will be in favor. However, since then, we now know that both parties have engaged the electronic warfare equipment. So most probably for some time, there is going to be a blackout for some drone operation. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be any footage, but it's going to be a lot harder to get it. Beyond that, additional nasty surprise that Russians have was obviously the aviation. It was always known that Russia would engage aviation. Right now, I've heard that it's going to be over 100 planes and over 100 helicopters that Russia has engaged in this southern operation. So it's quite a lot of air power compared to what Ukraine is having. And Ukrainian anti-air systems don't yet fully deny the air for the Russians, unfortunately. This is obviously a problem, because I think Ukrainians also were expecting to utilize a lot of their night vision capabilities, because a lot of Western equipment come with a proper night vision devices, like, for example, engineering equipment and so on, so they can work at night. However, the problem is that some of the Russian helicopters, they have a decent night vision equipment, and while the forces on the ground are lacking in night vision, that helicopter acts essentially as like a mobile scouting point, and it helps organize Russian defenses by scouting the fields like at night, and sending like notifications to the groups on the ground whenever there is like Ukrainian forces coming, or there is like some demining process and so on. But beyond that, Ukraine has started these advances. Ukraine is advancing quite good. It's reaching the second line of defense already in some place, and we're just a couple of days in. So some of the analysts that are saying, they're already saying that this is very, very good. Ukraine is advancing very fast, because other operations could have taken like weeks, months before they even get like somewhat close. But Ukraine is already getting there. And more importantly, Russians were very, very trigger happy with their artillery. Russians basically exposed a lot of their artillery. They exposed where it's located. They exposed where also their command points are located. And we just saw after that first engagement, when Russians kind of opened fire, like lead on, like sent in reinforcements, so on. After that, Ukrainian artilleryman and just like, yep, we're now going to have a field day. And then it's like hit, destroy. And it became a field day. So at some point, Ukraine will completely decimate the backline of the Russians. Moreover than that, we are hearing just today that there has been this white line, if you see it here. I'm going to use the red still. So this white line is the train line, the main train line that supplies this direction. And this train line has been blown up in two places at the same time, at least two places we know of. It is here around Melitopol, and it's here around Kirovskaya. So that's quite nice. It's a sabotage groups that are working behind the enemy lines, so it's going to get fixed, but at least it's a couple of days without supplies for the Russians. That is, again, very, very, very good news for Ukrainians. So after describing all of that, I believe Ukrainian armed forces are preparing a dilemma for Russian command. And that dilemma can roughly be described like this. Russians have this zone around Tokmak where they have significant lines of defenses. They have like defenses on top of defenses on top of defenses. It's a very well fortified position, and it's also the most vulnerable one. That is really bad. Really, really bad for them if it falls. It's pretty much like game over. Like everything, Crimea, everything is just done. And then they have the extensive lines, but then they don't have the big enough defenses on the, on the other side, in this area. In this area, if you look up, you find out that there's just one kind of big line that is significant enough. It's here. And after that, it's pretty much nothing else. It's like just small pockets. Mostly it is because Russians were really trying to, with their winter offensive, to capture Vuhledar and Velika Novosilka and essentially create this line of defense additionally. But because it was never created, since then they don't have anything. So it is obvious that the goal of the Russians were that we're going to prepare defensive lines here so we can dedicate some small forces here. And then if Ukrainians attack this weak point, then we're going to kind of hit them on the counteroffensive if their major plan of attack fails. However, we see Ukraine is developing really hard on this well-fortified position. So the question is, if you dedicate too much forces to defense of the supposedly fortified area, and then your less fortified area that has like only one line of defense is open, and then if Ukrainian forces just break that line of defense that, as you can see, they're already having some success in that direction already, well then whatever defenses you have here doesn't matter, because Ukraine is just going to strike from behind. And this is the dilemma for the Russian army. This is what I was explaining to you, that whatever one has constructed, the other person can break. Ukrainian forces, and again, this is just like on top of my head. There might be a lot more granular and a lot more important weak spots that Ukraine will find out. For example, there might be, like a lot of times, Ukraine strikes in the zone where the control of the front line is in between two different units, and they are not cooperating well enough. So that might be a weak spot where one of the units might think that it was supposed to be the job of the other unit to defend it, and they don't defend it themselves. That is the thing that is still possible. But I do believe that Ukrainian command has a plan. I see myself already that there is weaknesses in this defense line that Russia has built, and I know that Ukraine has the forces to achieve success. Where it's going to be, that's pretty much the question. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Huge thanks to all of the supporters at Patreon, supporters at Buy Me a Coffee, supporters at YouTube that are subscribing to this channel. It really helps. We had a good discussion just recently with some of the people that write me an email. By the way, write me emails. I don't have like a lot of time to answer them, but it's incredibly nice to read messages from you guys. So we had some discussions with the emails, and people were saying that they're having troubles, that they're feeling that they're not contributing enough to help support Ukraine. And this was the goal of me with starting this channel. So the fact that you're supporting me allows me to essentially overcome that uselessness feeling. The fact that I'm donating and I'm able to support the Ukrainian military is very, very much liberating. And more importantly, we're still running our NAFO 69 Sniffing Brigade together with NAFO 69 Sniffing Brigade campaign for getting 2 trucks to the 95th Brigade. Check out the link in the description, guys. Support it, support Ukrainian military. There's going to be a couple of weeks where Ukrainians just need to grind through the front lines of the Russians, and then we're going to see major actions. And I believe there is a lot of good news for us ahead. Slava Ukraini, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you next time.